I played about roughly 30 matches every school on Test Realm. So I have a pretty good experience of things, and like I said, guys, I think, you know, every school is back to being playable. We went from playable to unplayable to playable again now, which I think is great, and I think you're going to see a lot more schools actually up there on the tier list and not be at the bottom of the barrel like we've seen in the last meta. So yeah, let's start off with balance. Now, I think balance actually went under a lot of changes with Hydra being nerfed, and I believe KI is also going to get Sabretooth and Chimera out of there as well. The TC because it's above damage per pip. I think once the above damage per pip cards are banned on balance, I honestly feel like it's going to be like a B or an A tier school. I think a lot of the skill expression is going to come back to balance, which is what made it unique in the first place, in my opinion. Storm and balance are my favorite schools because they require the most the highest skill of play in general. However, balance has been very, you know, for a lack of a better term, brain dead for quite some time now. I think only at the start of 5th age it actually had some skill expression to it, so I think we're actually going to get a lot of that back. If you're a good balance player, I'd say probably A tier, but you know, most people that play balance this past 8 months, I think it's probably gonna go down to B tier. I think you can make the argument for it being A or B. I think either one is fine. I don't think it's S like it has been the past, you know, 8 months or so. I think I'm probably gonna put it down to, honestly guys, I want to say B tier, and the reason I'm putting it at B tier instead of A is simply because there's a lot more gambit play in the meta now, and balance can't really counter a lot of it, right? Balance can only counter gambits pretty much by doing like Gearhead, which covers like pots, dots, you know, legacy cards like poison as well. Makes it really, really good. But now there's just so much going on, and the counters you have to dual school into just simply don't work most of the time. I think the meta is just, you know, going more towards gambit play, gambit play, gambit play, and balance doesn't really have gambits, and the counters, like I said, you can't really dual school into them efficiently. So I think balance is going to be somewhere in the middle. If you are a good balance player, easily A tier, right, you can get rank, but I think most people, even the captains right now, the past 8 months, are probably going to drop down to Knight, maybe veteran even. Next up we have Death. I mean, this is an easy S tier. Death hasn't really gotten any nerfs this update aside from Banshee, and Banshee was nerfed because every school has been running it the past 8 months. And yeah, you still have Duel, which is just a better catch of the day. That's basically just 1 turn of tempo. You have a Shield Gambit, which just fries your opponent. You have Drains, whether that's TC Wraith, you know, Scarecrow, Vampire, you know, your Scion, still just insane value. I think in general, Death just does too much damage and takes too little as well. Combine this with chromatic weaknesses that are upwards to like 35, you know, 40, 50, 60, 65%. Just everything on the school is too high. All the numbers are too inflated on the chromatic weaknesses, their damage, and their defense. Combine that with an easy shield gambit as well, and just Drains being, you know, objectively broken, right? This school just, hands down, it's just the best. You really cannot argue otherwise. Fire, I think Fire, not an S tier. Not an S tier though. Fire is definitely a skill school again, which is really, really good. Honestly, I'm gonna put Fire A tier, guys. And the reason I'm putting Fire A tier is because you only have one bad matchup, arguably, and that's Life. Storm is pretty bad. I've been kicking Fire's ass. I think I've only lost to 1 or 2 on Test Realm, but I'd say Storm versus Fire is still a skill matchup. If the Fire does not know what they're doing against the Storm will win every time. Fire can just really, really do well in general against every single school, and with balance being a lot worse and Fire Gambits being a lot more common, harder to counter, and easier to set up, I think Fire just only has one bad matchup now, and that's Life. And the Storm versus Fire matchup is pretty much a skill expression matchup. Next up, we have Ice. Now, Ice was bottom of the barrel last update. but Ice got a lot better this update. Okay, well, what are the schools that Ice gets destroyed by? Myth, Fire. We're gonna see a lot of Myth and Fire though in the meta. Death is still really broken, even though Ice counters Death. Just they can Drain, right? And Shield Gambit. I feel like I want to say B tier. Yeah, I'm going B tier, guys, and I'm gonna put it behind Balance. Now, the reason I'm putting Ice behind Balance and in B tier is simply just because how the meta is gonna be, right? Jading is back, Fire is really good, Myth is really good, right? All three of those schools are gonna be like really popular, commonly queued, right? And Ice is not good against any of them. Next up, we have Life, and I'm putting Life in S tier easily. Now keep in mind, this is with the current build of Test Realm, guys, in week 2, right? Right now, Earthquake is still in the game, right? So they can just pack Earthquake, stall, not have to worry about Blade or Shield Gambits at all on a Life, and just not get one-shotted at all. You can't really trap a Life because they just Centaur, right? So the only thing you can do against a Life is, well, weakness, but guess what? This update introduced, you know, hanging effects that you can just counter 10 million weaknesses with, right? So you can't really counter or do anything against a Life. And Jading is going to be back this update with the amount of healing in the game, right? A Rebirth under a Sanct does 6k, and then a Gnomes does another 6k. Yeah, this happened to me multiple times on stream. That heals you for 2.1 thousand a round, and even if you use a Triton, you only counter 2 and there's 6 heals, right? And even on a Storm, right? If I Triton a Rebirth, I take away 2 heals, but that 1 heal on them is actually about equal to the Triton damage I just did. And if you're on a Storm or a Death, you're gonna have to pack at least 8 heal counters to beat that, right? And think about every other school that's not gonna be able to pack or use those counters as efficiently. That Triton on the Storm is equal to 1 tick of that Rebirth or whatever, the 1 hot the Rebirth gives. Think about every other school that can't actually do that much damage on their Triton, right? It's just going to be absolutely insane, and Jading is going to be out of control. Myth school, I think I'm going to have to put Myth in S, but I might drop it down to A because the counter schools for Myth, which are Life and Fire, are actually pretty good as well. However, I think obviously, I mean, no, I think you have to put Myth in S tier, right? Because just the fact of the matter, you can just win the game by like not having to really play at all, you know? But then if you give a good player the Myth school, like it's gonna be really freaking hard to lose. Yeah, Death number 1, Life number 2, and then definitely Myth number 3. Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's definitely my tier list. Absolutely, without a doubt in my mind here. I mean, Myth Gen just still one-shots a Storm, right? You know, Stone Colossus, who's buff Stone, buff Minnow, you know, buff Pigs, right? Now you can even do like a calendar and get all your pips back and do 6k with 2 buffs on a calendar and just do another 4k. It's just insane. This school, I think in general, what I've learned this update, this school just has too much damage and they always get open hits. I think you need to look at the pacing of Myth spells and the damage on the Myth spells. And if you don't shield their weakness because, like, you know, you're fueling their fire, their raw damage output is too high, so you lose. So you lose if you try to weakness, you lose if you try to shield, and you lose if you try not to do anything because their overall damage is too high. However, I think Life versus Myth, Life can actually beat Myth with the new hot changes because Life can actually not be in fear for their life in 3 rounds and actually tank stuff out, get value on their cards, right, and actually leverage those hots. So I think Myth just, I don't know, man. They need to look at something with the damage and the pacing because the Myth versus Storm matchup, at least, is just like horrible. It's horrible, and I really hope the next Rapid Rumble shows that because like it's just absolutely insane and horrible. Okay, so Storm. Now I saved the best for last. I did think Storm was S or A tier, and I don't know. I honestly, I could see the argument for it being A tier. I could see that absolutely. But I think most people aren't going to be able to play Storm to that level. If you're a good Storm player, I think this school could be A tier. But no offense to the Storm homies, I think most of us are, you know, not can't play the school to that level, right? And that's okay, right? That's okay. Storm is like the highest skill school in PvP by far, right? So I want to think and say I think Storm is probably B tier. It's hard to say because Death vs Storm is just absolutely unwinnable. Like the game is unplayable, and Myth vs Storm is unplayable. But if we look at things objectively, right? Last meta, you had 3 unplayable matchups, right? That was balance. Was it balance, Myth, and Death? But now you only lose to Myth and Death, right? So the school has gone better objectively. I think I'm gonna have to leave Storm at last still, just simply because of how difficult it is to play. And like I said, against like a Myth and a Death, it just really shows the fundamental flaws of shield gambits that are still going to be extremely popular, because again, you cannot dual school on anybody, let alone on a Storm. It's just not possible. So unless KingsIsle can, you know, maybe start addressing the pacing issues with, you know, Death and Myth, and, you know, fix a couple of the standardized TC that are above damage per pip, I think, you know, Storm's gonna still be the worst school, but it's not a bad school. It's just some school has to come in last, right? That's just always how a tier list works. I think if you're a really good Storm player, I would put it A tier. Absolutely. But I think most people generally, and how most of your games are gonna go, probably gonna be B tier. But this is the first time I've had a tier list that is just S, A, B, and no C or D. So I think that's really good. I think that's really cool. I just want to say, like, good job to KI in general on this update, because like I said, pretty much every school is playable. And be sure you pack at least 8 heal counters on a Storm to beat life, because if you're only packing 4, you are going to lose that school. It is still, I mean, jading is back. It's broken. So until they do something about that, at least pack 8 heal counters on a Storm. And God bless your soul if you're on any school that's not Death or Storm. You're gonna need to pack at least 12 counters just to beat the jading lives, right? But yeah, that's my tier list, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Let me know if you agree or disagree. I tried to explain everything to the best of my ability. And yeah, I will see you guys on the next one. Leave a like and a sub if you made it this far, and take care, y'all.